welcome you back to Ancient Tracks, a Beast Inquiry. We are going to talk to Chuck about an encounter he had just a few months ago. Chuck?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about your encounter.
Some people that know me probably don't know that I ran into some difficulties here that started the Christmas before last. I'm diabetic, and basically in a 4-month time period, I lost vision in my eyes. I've had 3 surgeries already, but I have a friend and we used to spend a lot of time out in the woods. And I've been sitting at home pretty much every day. And it's been a nightmare for me because I've worked hard all my life. And when this situation came up, it's drugged me down big time. I mean, it's hard to explain living your life for a long time, working hard every day, and then all of a sudden that's taken away from you. So I was really depressed, down in the dumps, and this buddy of mine called me one day and said, "Chuck, I think you've been in the house way too long." And he said, "We're gonna go out in the woods." And I told him, I said, "Man, I've been dying for somebody to tell me to go out in the woods." Of course, I knew my situation, and because of my eyesight's not very good, I knew that I wouldn't be able to do the things that I normally do when I go out. It was a blessing to me that he offered to come pick me up and us going out into the woods again. So we did that. This area is on a lake, probably about an hour and a half drive from where I live here in Oklahoma. And we've been out this certain situation several times, found structures out there, found possible tracks. And on the north side of the lake is National Wildlife Refuge. Lots of deer, lots of hogs, lots of ducks, and just everything that a lake has. And not very many people go out to this part of the lake because it's a wildlife refuge. And the only time it's really a busy situation is when it's deer season, because a lot of people go out there and deer hunt. And I've actually heard stories about that area from a guy that I used to work with. He bow hunts in this area. And I want to tell this story before I get to what happened to me. He's a bow hunter, and he tells me that one year while out there bow hunting, he always put up a tree stand and sits in a tree stand. And he had a doe come right underneath where he had his deer stand put up. And so he knocked an arrow in his bow and shot this doe and made a really good hit. And normally most people that know deer hunters and use a bow, they know that you got to wait 15 or 20 minutes before you can actually get down out of your stand, because that gives the time for the deer to bleed out. And so he waited, and he finally got down and started tracking the blood that was in the leaves. And he got to a certain spot not far from where his deer stand was. He sees what looks like an area where the doe actually hit the ground, and there was blood all over the ground, so that the deer had bled out, which is what you do when you bow hunt. But there was one thing missing. The deer wasn't there. And it kind of confused him a little bit because he had never had that happen before. Well, he looked around for quite a while trying to find more blood, and he finally found a couple drops of blood on a leaf. And he decided that he was going to see if he could track this doe. And he walked and walked and walked and followed the blood trail. He picked up a trail and followed the trail, and he ended up right back where his deer stand was. And what he found when he got there was a hindquarter of the doe that he had shot, but the rest of the deer was gone, which
That's
is
great.
very unusual, to say the
Right.
least. It was almost as if I've got mine and I'm giving you a piece of it. And so, anyway,
It's
there,
like, thanks for the deer.
yeah, exactly. And you hear stories of some of this stuff happening before, but never have I ever heard of a story where part of the deer was actually left at the spot where he had hunted from. Never heard that before. Most of the time, the whole deer is missing, and guys never find their deer.
Yeah.
And I know several people that have had that happen. So this area is a really active area. And like I said, we have found structures out there and possible tracks. And on the north side of the lake, where this wildlife refuge area is, they had went into this part of the lake and built some boat docks. Well, not long after they built these boat docks, they actually channeled the river into a different area. And when they did that, it dropped the level of the water there down to like probably 3, maybe 4 feet at the deepest. That's why. I mean, the water's so shallow there, they cannot put a boat up there. I
Okay.
think a lot of people take kayaks around that area sometimes and go kayaking.
Yeah.
But the water is so short there that there's actually now islands. These islands got lots of cattails, lots of timber on these islands, and they're just all over the place out there. It's a unique area. Well, we went to this one particular dock and looked around, and we spent all day looking around. We found some more structures, and drove around quite a bit. It was just a good time for me to actually get out and do something that I really love to do and have loved to do for quite a while. So as the night progressed, it started getting dark, which made me, I don't know how I would say, I just had this idea that, I'm not going to do very much good once it gets dark, because there's this whole area is full of timber, and I thought, boy, that's all I need is for me to trip over a tree limb or something and fall down face first or something like that. So we decided that we were going to park the truck uh, back by the boat ramp, and we were probably, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 feet from the boat ramp. And I decided that I was just going to stay in the truck, because therefore I wouldn't take a chance of falling or something like that. And he was in agreement with that. He didn't have a problem with that. So I had a friend of mine a while back that told me about a device. Um,
Don't share that.
I'm not going to tell the name. I'm not going to say what the device is. And the reason why I'm not is because of what happened.
Yeah.
Um, but he told me about this device and told me that this will attract a Bigfoot. That if Bigfoot's in the area, they will come. And he was shocked to have that kind of thing happen. In fact, it spooked him so bad he called me to tell me what happened, and where he was at, he got the feeling after using this that by this time it was dark, and he felt like they were all around him.
I have a question. Is this
Yes.
is this who I think that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So smart me decided that, you know what, I'm going to see if I can't find one of these things. And I started researching it and decided I was going to get one. And I did. So I had this with me, and I had been dying to go out into the woods to use this device to see if it's really true that these things, Bigfoot in general, would come to you if you use this thing. And as I said, it got dark, and I had my audio recorder with me with headphones, and I decided I was just going to sit in the truck and use this device to see what would happen. So I'm in the truck. I use the device, and almost immediately, and by this time it's pretty dark, and there's woods all around this area, and when it gets dark there, it's really a dark spot. So I use the device, and almost instantly I hear, and this friend of mine's with me, he hears two frogs croaking. But the thing is, they don't sound like frogs. But there were two of them. And on this particular lake, if frogs are in the area, you're going to hear hundreds of them, not just two. And he looked over at me and said, I've never heard a bullfrog sound like that. And I said, neither have I. And we both figured out that we were hearing something that wasn't a bullfrog. And at the same time this happened, what we hear out in the lake part where all the cattails are in the islands, we hear what sounds like water slashing. And what it sounded to me like, or what it reminded me of, is like you're in the water and you're in shallow water and you scoot your feet on the bottom of the lake there. The water slushes up on your legs as you're walking. And that's what it sounded like. It was bipedal. We knew it was bipedal. It would take a step and stop. And then it would take a little bit later, it would take another step and it would stop. And it was coming toward us. And
Hey, Chuck,
yes.
is there anything in that area big enough to walk in that deep of water? Not that it's that deep, but to make that noise?
No.
Just that one noise and then stop and then make another noise and stop.
Right. It was bipedal and it was walking toward us.
Yeah.
So the guy that's with me, he wants to try this object. So he uses it, and almost instantly the frogs that we hear are coming toward us as well. So not only do we hear this bipedal coming toward us, but we hear these two frogs coming from a different direction coming toward us as well. At this point in time, I'm thinking, because I'm hearing all this with my audio recorder and I'm recording it, and I can hear it with my earphones really well. And I'm thinking to myself, something's not right. And I decide to use this object one last time. And so I do. And the footsteps are getting closer and closer to me, closer to us. And so are the frogs, quote unquote. And I'm starting to get a little bit nervous. And he comes over into the truck, and I look at him and I said, man, we got to get out of here. Something's not right. And if we don't get out of here, we're going to be in trouble. I just had that sixth sense kicked in, and I felt like we have got to go, or else we're going to be into a bad situation. And he asked me, he said, why do you say that? And I said, because, man, I'm hearing them. They're all around us. And he says, well, I'm hearing them too. And he says, but I've never, ever had any kind of situation out here to where I felt like I was in danger. And I told him, I said, dude, I'm feeling it. We need to go. And because I'm still got my headphones on, I'm still listening to all this. And after I use this device the third time, not only did I hear the two frogs and the one that was coming across the water, but there's the wood line where I was sitting in the passenger seat. The wood line was probably 4 or 5 feet from me. And I start hearing footsteps coming from the wood line coming toward the truck. And at this point, I'm thinking, we got to go. And I told him again, I said, we got to go. We're going to be in a bad situation. We don't. And as I'm sitting there, he tells me, I got my 5,000 lumen headlamp. It was real powerful headlamp. And he tells me, he says, I'm going to start the truck. And he said, then I'm going to walk back there to the back of the truck and point my headlamp out in the water, see if I can see anything. And I said, okay. And he said, if I see something, I'll be back in the truck in a hurry and we'll get out of here. And I said, okay, that's fine. So he gets out of the truck and walks back behind the truck where the tailgate is. And I'm sitting in the truck. I'm still listening to all this. The one in the wood line is still coming toward me. And I'm starting to get a little antsy. And he comes back to the truck. And I said, did you see anything? He said, oh, yeah. He said there was a Bigfoot that was out there by the boat ramp. That was probably 5 or 6 feet from the boat ramp. And he said, when I hit him with my 5,000 lumen headlamp, he said he ducked his head down to his chest so it wouldn't hurt his eyes. And he said, I saw red eye shine too. And he said, I started walking back toward the truck and I looked over on your side of the truck and there was one on the passenger side of the truck that was coming up behind you. And at that particular time, when he heard this or saw this one, that he told me, he said, I reached up and grabbed my recorder off the top of the truck. And when I did, we both heard a growl. And he told me, he said, it was getting really, really close to you and it was time to go. And I said, yeah. And we got out of there in a hurry, got out of there alive, thank goodness. But we called each other the very next day and was talking about the whole event. And he finally realized, he said, I think you were right. I think if we would have stayed there longer, we would have been into some trouble. And I said, I told you. And I said, so you saw him pretty clearly? He said, yeah. He said, the one that was down by the water was probably about a 9-footer. And he said, the one that was walking up beside you and growled at you, he said that one was probably about an 8 or 8.5-footer. And we talked about the whole situation, and we think that not only did we have the one in the wood line and the one that was in the water, but we both confirmed to each other that the frogs, the quote frogs, unquote, that we heard were not frogs. And we think there was probably a total of 4 of them that had surrounded us. And I decided right then and there after that night that I wasn't going to use that device anymore.
Not a good idea.
No.
That is scary. That is so terrifying. So the 2 frogs, they were off somewhere else, but they were together?
Yes, they were where we were parked.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically on the boat ramp, and off to our right was another island with cattails, and that's where we heard the frogs coming from.
The frogs.
So it was, yeah, quote unquote. And so they were coming at us from, looked like 3 different angles. The ones coming from that sounded like frogs, the one behind us, and the one that was on the side of me, on the side of the pickup. So they were flanking us, is what they were doing.
How far was the one at the boat ramp? How far was it from the truck?
probably about 10 foot from the truck.
Wow, so it was right there.
Yeah. And the creepy thing about it was as I'm listening to my recorder and I'm hearing this one coming through the water, it was just one step at a time, really slow, like it was trying to sneak up on us. Of course, the one that was on my side of the truck was walking pretty slow as well. It was like they were being cautious coming up to where we were. But with him seeing them and the audio recorder that I have, there's no doubt in my mind what we ran into and what caused them to come to us. I don't know. I don't know about this device. I will say that that's the reason why I don't want to tell what it was that I used,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that it could very well be a bad situation for somebody who tries to use that thing to bring them in, because they will come.
Right. And you
And
don't know
how they're going to respond.
how they're going to respond. You don't know what you're saying to them or what it means to them.
And, anything could have triggered them to do what they did.
Yeah.
And they could have thought that it could have been an animal. And they thought, well, maybe there's a food source, or it could have just ticked them off. I mean, we don't really know what caused them to gravitate toward the device that we used.
Yeah.
And that's pretty scary. And if I was to say what this thing was, somebody might try to go out there and find one. And if they find one, they use it. And I don't want to be the reason why somebody gets hurt or somebody gets killed. The problem is we don't know enough about these creatures to know how they're going to interact with something like that.
Yeah.
Other than what happened to us. And that's pretty scary. And I don't want to be the one who gets somebody hurt or gets somebody killed. I just don't. If somebody asked me, are you ever going to do that again? And I said, well, not unless I've got about 10 guys with guns around me. I'm just not going to do it. But that is the first time, I tell you what, I've been around these things enough and have been into some pretty rough territory where I knew they were. And I've never really felt like I was in some kind of harm until that night. My sixth sense kicked in and said, let's go. And that was what happened to me about probably 4 or 5 months ago. And it's like I said, I know this area. I've been there. I know they're there. We've found possible tracks, and I know other people that have been in that same area and have found tracks as well. So I know they're there. This whole area is perfect area for them because, like I said, there's lots of wildlife there. There's deer there. There's wild hogs. There's ducks. All kinds of wildlife. The food source there is good. The water source is good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a habitat that they tend to gravitate toward, stay in that area.
I do want to ask you, so where y'all were parked on these docks, I've been to the lake, but I've never been in that part of the lake.
Mm-hmm.
Were y'all on the north side of all of the islands, or were you more south?
We were on the north side of the island.
Okay.
Yeah. The cool factor is we had found some amazing structures in there, some really amazing teepee type structures.
Mm-hmm.
And we know they're there. It's pretty obvious that they're there. And all up and down this area, there's been sightings and been encounters down through there quite a bit. And when I first got into the Bigfoot thing, I never thought in a million years that I'd ever find them in Oklahoma or Texas. And
Mm-hmm.
all I can say is Oklahoma is a habitat that is very well suited for them. There are some big ones out there. we've run across one that we think is probably close to a 10-footer.
Right.
And he left a 23-inch track in the ground.
Are you talking about northwest?
Yeah, northwest of the state, which is not too far from where we were 4 months ago. I mean, we weren't too far from that area.
Yeah.
And we found 23-inch track there in this one area that's north of there, northwest of there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually also found 23-inch tracks in Ponca City, Oklahoma, which was a shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's ranching land out there.
What's really weird about that situation is I had a lady that contacted me and wanted me and my team to, this has been several years ago, but she was having activity around her house. And she told me that she wanted me and my team to come down there. She had been living with them for 4 years and wanted them to get away from her because they were coming up to her house. They were peeking in her windows. She found baby tracks in her flower bed, just all kinds of things like that were taking place. And so I gathered up the team and we went down there and spent the weekend down there on her property. And the most amazing thing was she lived in a housing addition. There were houses all over the place. And driving up to where she was at, I was thinking to myself, there's no way they're in this area. They can't be. This is a residential area. Houses everywhere, people everywhere. And when we got there, she starts pulling out casted prints that she has casted on her own property.
Was it just a normal residential neighborhood, or were these houses far apart?
Where she lived, it was a residential section, but there were houses all over the place. And we actually found a handprint on one of her garbage cans. It was huge, probably 3 times bigger than my hand. And I was just amazed that they were being brave enough to come into town like that.
They were dumpster diving.
Yes. And she planted a garden. One of the things that she really loved to grow was garlic. And she grew, I don't know how many strains of different types of garlic that she raised, but she raised it every year. And every year, she didn't get one clove of garlic off her plants. And they would take squash and anything else that she put in her garden, it would be gone too. And I could understand how upset she was about everything because it was all around her.
Yeah. Was there a green belt next to her, like a creek or something that led to out of town?
As a matter of fact, yes. We did a weekend investigation there, and we noticed that 100 yards from her house, there was a creek bed there.
Mm-hmm.
And we started following the creek, and where it ended up flowing into the Arkansas River.
No.
We went out to the Arkansas River and found possible tracks that were on the riverbed. But what they were doing was they were going down the creek bed to get to her property.
Oh, yeah.
And they had those big round galvanized pipes underneath the highway there.
Yeah.
And what they were doing was they were coming down the creek away from the river and following the creek, going through all these housing additions, and they would crawl underneath that pipe to get to her property. And like I said, we found 2 23-inch tracks there. There was a right foot and a left foot in her backyard. And for something that big to be in a residential area was pretty amazing. And we gave her some ideas on what to do. There was a wood pile right back behind her house, and you could tell where something had been laying underneath that wood pile. I said that one of the first things that you need to do is get rid of that wood pile. I said, because they're coming up to your house, watching you, and they know what you're doing all the time. And the second thing that you need to do is put real bright lights around your house to keep them from coming to your windows and stuff like that. Hopefully, we helped her situation by giving her some pointers. Another thing that we told her to do, and this is an old Native American thing, one of the tribal people told me, if you have a situation where you have a garden and if you lose all your vegetables in a certain amount of time, obviously they're coming in there to get the vegetables. So what you need to do is plant 2 gardens. And you go out there and you plant 1 garden for them and you plant 1 garden for yourself. I don't know if that works, but I told her about it. Said this is what a Native American elder told me to do in a situation like that. And that's what we try to do when we go out like that, is we try to help people out in their situations. And you know that pretty well because we went to a situation, you were with us and your brother was with us. And that was a pretty eye-opening experience as well.
Yeah. I almost knelt on a snake. Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
I almost planted my knee right on top of a snake. I don't even know what kind of snake it was, but I was out. I was out of there.
Was that down on the creek?
Yeah, it wasn't very far from that facility. Do you remember? But yes, in the creek.
I think that was some kind of civilian place that people used to hang out at or something.
Yeah.
There was a post office there too, wasn't there?
Well, I remember passing it on my way around the mountain to her house. I can't remember what it was called. We talked a little bit about this in the first episode, but this was another part of the outing down there. But when we were out in the woods that day, my brother and Larry, they went on down that hill.
Yeah.
And I think the creek was down there, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So they went really far down there, but remember we heard that noise and it was like coming around. There was like a even though we were out in the middle of the woods, it was almost like a hedge where we were at the top.
Yeah.
But something was coming around, but it never. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
We thought it was them. We thought it was them coming back up, but we saw them probably about 20, 30 yards off in the other direction. Like there was no way that could, I don't remember what that was, but it was just like, okay, it's going to step out any moment.
Yeah.
We're going to see whatever it is. Nothing ever did.
Right.
And I mean, that's kind of like what happened in her front yard. And that's another thing I wanted to be clear about was that micro wooded area in front of her house. Right. That was a green belt that went on into the national forest.
Yeah, we actually drove around on the national forest area, I think.
Yeah.
And we found a big tree that had been broken apart. And it wasn't from a bulldozer or nothing like that, or there's no chain marks on it or anything. It was just busted apart. And
oh my goodness, do you remember? I thought so. Me and my brother were staying in her RV, and y'all were in her husband's man cave. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I really thought I heard something walking down the side of the RV, because she was saying they were coming up in the back, and that's where we were. They were also coming up in her backyard, which was wooded. Neighbors were far apart, but we did go look on Google Map, and even coming up the back, it was all woods going to the national forest. But I thought it was you coming up the side of the RV, and by the time the noise got to the door of the RV, I really expected you to come in, and I don't know what it was,
and I didn't come in,
and nobody came in, and I'm like hollering at my brother, "Hey, you want to make sure it's locked or something?"
Had multiple sightings, I think, there. And in fact, I think one time she even thought that she had seen a dog man in the area that was looking over her wooden fence
in the back. Yeah. So that's just horribly terrifying.
Yes.
But I wanted to also add, you were talking about where this lady in Ponca City was located. in the middle of town. But you know where I live,
Yes.
and 5 miles there was, and this is on a tollway. Um, Guy reported he was coming back from working at one of the medical facilities here, a hospital. I'm guessing just based on what he said. But it was late at night, and he was driving a big old truck, and he was going down that, it's 75 miles an hour on this tollway. But had a deer run out of a wooded area, and deer came across the 4-lane highway, and this monstrous thing came out after it, got it on the side of the road, and as he slowed down because he didn't know what it was. But the thing stood up, and it was down on the grade. It was as tall as him. He said it was a dog man, but it looked right at him in the window, and he just like got out. He booked it.
Right.
And 15, 20 miles from me on the east side of town, there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings up there. I shouldn't say a lot. Way more than what you would expect.
Right.
Where I'm at.
Well, I know that you and I have talked before about some of the things here in Oklahoma. Back in the 70s, there were several sightings down in Lawton, Oklahoma, that people had supposedly seen a dog man. In fact, the reports were reported to the sheriff's department, and I think they even had an event. And Lawton, there's a big army base there, and they even alerted the soldiers that were there doing maneuvers and stuff, and they were told to have live ammo in their guns, and that if they seen this thing, to shoot it. I don't think it ever got shot, but there's all kinds of reports down in that area of dog man sightings, which I've never seen one. I have seen some tracks that were kind of unusual. They definitely weren't Bigfoot tracks, but I've never seen one. But I know two of my best researchers on the team have seen them several times out in western Oklahoma. So there's a lot of things here in Oklahoma that if you're into cryptozoology or something like that, it's the perfect place to be, because we've got some weird stuff here in Oklahoma. So I know some areas in Oklahoma. I'm not going to say where these areas are, but there's been some really weird sightings and encounters from people in several different places.
Mm-hmm.
One was one report. Well, I got more than one report. I had probably 4 or 5 reports of what people call the little people, and there was one of the people that told me this, gave me this report, was a police officer, and he was there when it happened and saw it. And I don't think a police officer would give you that kind of information if he didn't see it or did see it. I don't, you just, they kind of keep that kind of stuff quiet. Plus, I've heard reports out in western Oklahoma where there's caves, and there are people that say they have seen goat man in that area. I don't know what to think about all this stuff. I don't know if it's something is there, because more than one eyewitness has told me that. And I don't think that they're just making stuff up. I think they're actually seeing stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I'd do if I saw a goat man. I don't want to see anything like that, and I don't really want to see a dog man either.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
but the sightings are out there.
Yeah, they are. And some of it has to be misidentification if you want to speak logically about it. But these people are not fantastical minded people. The ones that I've talked to with you, and they don't even want anybody to know. They just want to talk
Right.
to somebody that doesn't think they're crazy.
That's exactly right. And when you run across those kind of people, you have to take the report, look at the report, and definitely don't tell them they're crazy or they're out of
Mm-mm.
their minds, because they're not. They're
Right.
actually they're seeing something out there.
Mm-hmm.
And Oklahoma's a good place to be. That's for sure. Because we've got quite a few places to go. We've been to quite a few different places, different areas. Um, one of the guys that's on the team, you and your brother went out there with us, and that was way out in western Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and we had some things happen to us while we were there.
Yeah.
One of the guys has property there, and he's found tracks. He's seen them.
Yeah.
um,
We camped out and slept in tents in his yard because he has them coming up.
mhm,
And again, he's out in the middle of nowhere, and his neighbor is probably a half mile away.
right,
But even sleeping out in his yard, I heard a baby crying across the street, and there's nobody across that dirt road.
right. No houses, no nothing out there.
Yeah.
It definitely wasn't a baby calf or anything bawling.
Mm-mm.
It was something else.
Yeah. No, I've been
And
around cows almost my whole
and
life.
he's heard cries, baby cries out there,
Mm-hmm.
uh, out in his pasture. So, and there's a lot of reports in that area that people are seeing Bigfoot in those areas. And in fact, your brother brought his kayak with him when we went out there, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of kayaked down the creek, and didn't see anything that day. We thought what we could have been a possible track, but there was really no definite proof to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I get a report from the guy that we're talking about, and he tells a story that the same creek that your brother went up in his kayak, not too long ago, there was a boy that was down there fishing in the same area in the creek down there, and he was out there fishing, and he heard a noise behind him, and he turned around and looked, and he said this thing was humongous. He said it was a Bigfoot, and it was right in the same area where we had actually sent your brother out in a kayak to kind of look for stuff. And of course, we didn't see any stuff while we were there, but just goes to show you that, if you keep going to these places where we know there's activity and people have sightings.
So, talking about all of the stuff that you have found, all of
Mm-hmm.
the things that you have shared with me, I was going to mention this earlier when you were talking about your area to the northwest
Mm-hmm.
part of
Right.
Oklahoma. I remember you sending me pictures, and I am still amazed by it.
The
Uh,
tree structures that we found.
Not the tree structures, the rocks. It was this little,
Arch.
yes, that is amazing. And
It is.
it's in the middle of nowhere. And that's when, years ago when we were having this conversation, I was all about them being, so many things have gone through my head as to what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the what am I, the woods caretaker, and I even think that we were joking about it one time. I'm like, what if they're just out there gardening, like all these tree breaks,
Right.
maybe they're just out there gardening, maybe they just decided to build this little arch, but it was so intricate and
Yes.
it balanced.
Yeah. The amazing thing about that, and I wish we could show some of the listeners some of this stuff, but
I
uh,
can do it.
the most amazing thing about that arch was it was sitting on top of a log,
Yes.
and it had great big rocks was the foundation of the arch, but they had stuck little pebbles underneath the big rocks to keep them stable. And that's what's amazing about that particular photo.
Yeah.
And um, that whole area down there is a pretty amazing place to go and see. And
Yeah.
I'm not gonna mention where this is at or anything like that. Um, we've actually went north of there to another area that is it's not a wildlife refuge. Well, I guess it could be. I'm not really sure, but um, this area is pretty active as well. And we found some TP structures in this area, and you didn't get to go down to that area. We weren't doing anything at the time,
Yeah.
but we found tree structures, and this is a park area. I don't know if it's a national park or might be just a state park. I'm not really sure, but they got picnic tables out there and places where people can camp. And we went out there. Me and two other people went out there, and one year, and it was cold, cold, cold. Snow was on the ground. I mean, it was pretty frigid. But right on top of one of the picnic tables in the back part of the park, uh, there was a structure sitting on top of the freaking uh, table, which was really weird. And then probably about 10 feet away from it was another structure. Of course, nobody was in the park but us.
Yeah.
And, that could have been human, but it didn't really seem like human. I don't know why humans would be out there making tree structures when it's 30 degrees and snow on the ground. I really
Right.
don't know.
Like
Let's go out to this park and build some structures. Really?
yeah. So, but see, we left from there and went down to the canyons, and that's when we had the weirdest, sickest owl sounds that night.
Oh, yeah, yeah. At Red Rock Canyon.
Yeah.
And I don't mind saying that because a lot of people know about Red Rock Canyon. Um,
Okay.
I've been down there quite a few times. I've camped out there quite a few times, and had some really crazy experiences there. I actually got hit by infrasound there. When I first started going in there, I came across these really beautiful structures in the woods. I mean, they were way back away from the park. And I was telling one of my buddies about it, and he brought his wife, and they showed up, and they wanted to see these structures. And so I was taking them around up on the mountain part, and I get to this one spot area, and I'm in the lead, and they're behind me, and all of a sudden I hear a growl,
Mm.
and I stopped dead in my tracks, and I turned around and looked at them. I said, "Y'all hear that growl?" And they said, "Yeah, we heard it." Well, when I turned back around, the strangest thing was I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what trail I was on. I didn't know how to get back to where we started from. It was a really odd feeling. And I had been down these trails so many times that I knew my way around this area. And the very first thing that caught my mind at that point was this reminds me of a lot of the 411 cases
Yeah.
where people are out hiking. They've probably been on those trails many times, and they end up 6, 7, 8, sometimes 11, 12 miles away from where they started from. and
Yeah.
and they've died because of maybe the weather or whatever. They had found bones and stuff like that. And that was the first thing that came to my mind was maybe that's what's happening to some of these people in 411 cases, is that they get infrasound and lose their way, because
Yeah.
that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And
Disoriented. Yeah.
the two people that were with me that day, they didn't that was the first time they'd ever been there. They didn't know how to get back to where we were. And we finally had to pick up a cell phone and use GPS to get us back to where we were. And
how long did you have that disoriented feeling?
probably about 30 or 40 minutes.
That is crazy.
And of course, thanks to GPS on our phones, I mean, we got right back where we came from, but it really freaked me out. And that was, I've had infrasound hit me one time, and I had two people with me at different times, and both of those people got hit by infrasound, and it affected them differently. One of them was about on the park that I talked about a minute ago, where we found the structure on the picnic table. Down by the river there, we found a really big teepee structure and big logs too. And the guy that was with me, he's a Marine, or used to be a Marine. Of course, once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine, according to them. Anyway, um, he decided he was going to go and grab a hold of one of the logs that was built up on this teepee structure and see how heavy it was. Well, I was away from him probably about 10 or 15 yards, and he tried picking up the log and couldn't pick it up. About that time, I turned around and looked at him, and he was on his knees. And I said, "What's the matter with you?" And he goes, "What's the matter with me?" And I said, "You got hit, didn't you?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "What are you feeling right now?" And he said, "I feel like the top of my head's about to explode." And I think it lasted probably 30 or 40 minutes on him before he didn't feel sick anymore and his headache was going away. But that was one encounter that I had. And then I had another encounter where we had took somebody out to a location she wanted to go and wanted me to take her out there, out to this area. And there's a walking bridge that goes across a creek there. And there's been lots of sightings, lots of history in this area, lots of history. And we get on the walking bridge. I'm taking her back to the back part of the property there, because that's where there's a lot of stuff that you can find out there if you really look for it. I'm talking about structures or whatever.
Mhm.
And we start walking across this walkway, this walking bridge, and I'm in front, and she's behind me. And I get about halfway across, and she grabs the back of my shirt, and I turn around and I said, "What's the matter? What's wrong?" And she goes, "I'm feeling really sick." And I said, "Well, first of all, before she grabbed my shirt, I heard a growl." And I turned around and looked at her and I said, "Did you hear the growl?" She said, "Yeah, I did." And we kept going. And then it wasn't probably several minutes later, she grabs a hold of my shirt, says, "We got to turn back." And I said, "What's the matter? What's wrong?" She said, I feel like I'm fixing to throw up." She said, "My stomach," she goes, "I just don't feel right. My stomach's hurting me. My head's hurting me." And so I walked her back out of there. And that same day, I caught a juvenile peeking through a grapevine there, and got 3 pictures of the juvenile peeking through the grapevines. And it's probably one of the best pictures I've got, because in each frame, I took 3 pictures. In each frame, you can see it's changed its movement on all 3 different photos. But that's 3 different times that I've actually been involved or been around infrasound. So done a lot of things, been a lot of places, seen a lot of things, a lot of pictures, lots of pictures. Got a hair sample that I still have. Got lots of audio. So I've been schooled, I guess. If I ever get my eyesight back, I'm going to be back in school, which I hope happens pretty quick. At least that's my hope. Anyway.
Well, Chuck, tell us about the time you went to Alabama. We've been talking about Oklahoma. Let's talk about Alabama.
Well, as you know, I've been to quite a few states and been on quite a few different expeditions. Um, I had the pleasure one time to go to Alabama, and some guys. I think there was one, two, there was four of us that went camping, and we were on a mountain, and this place is called Newsom Sinks, is the name of it. And Newsom Sinks is there's a cave system there. There's a lot of caves in Alabama, if you know where to go. And this particular cave is a pretty famous cave because during the Civil War, the Confederates actually, excuse me, where this mountain is, at the bottom of the mountain is there's a waterfall that falls over the top of the mountain there, and there's lots of water down under there too as well. And anyway, the Confederates used to make their powder for their guns and their weapons down there in this cave system. And so it's pretty well known if you know where it's at. And of course, we didn't go down, it's about a 45-foot drop to get down to that area. So we pretty much stayed away from the ledge, so to speak. And this place is a beautiful place, lots of timber. And we just decided that we were going to go out there and camp out one night. And we went out there and put up our camp, put up our tents and stuff, and got the fire ready and stuff like that. It was probably about 6:30 in the afternoon, or kind of in the evening there. And we're all just sitting around there. And one of the guys in the group decided that he said, I think I'm going to make a scream. I'm thinking at this point in time, I'm thinking, okay, it's 6:30 in the afternoon. I don't think he's going to get any response, but hey, what the heck? He makes a call, and instantly, we get the same call from three different areas. And all four of us, I think, were thinking, holy cow, we never anticipated that to happen. And I think we were all four of us, we were in shock that he got that kind of result that quick from four different areas, and or three different areas, and three responses from making the same call that he had just made. And it wasn't an echo off the mountain or anything like that. It was definitely coming from three different directions. And we were just stunned. And as we're standing there, and we're all four of us are looking at each other, holy cow. About 5 or 10 minutes later, we're still standing around there with our mouths drawn open, and pebbles start being thrown at our tents. And we just all were fascinated by the activity we got almost instantly after he made this scream. I had a recorder that I was listening to, and I turned that on, and I was hearing footsteps and all around us, so to speak. And two of the guys got really tired by this point. We had cooked some dinner and had ate, and then two of the guys were tired, and one of the guys was sleeping in a tent. And he went and got in his tent, and the other guy that was there, he had a hammock. I had a hammock, and I think it was his brother had a hammock too. So three of us were sleeping in hammocks, and the other was sleeping in a tent. And me and his brother stayed up by the fire. I wasn't ready to go to bed. I was still thinking about what had just taken place. And so me and him sat out by the fire, and we were sitting around the fire till probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And the whole time we were at the campfire, just me and him, pebbles would be pinging us ever so often, but it was pretty consistent. And he finally got tired. He wanted to go to bed, and I decided I was going to go jump in my hammock. So I jumped in my hammock, and the whole thing I can't in the meeting frame. I've got earphones on. I'm listening to these footsteps, and I hear these things walking all around the camp where we were. And I keep thinking to myself, I'm fixing to peek over the top of my hammock, and there's going to be one standing there looking at me as I look up. And so I had all these kind of thoughts going through my head because I could hear them all around us. And anyway, probably about 4, I didn't really sleep very good there. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, I knew that we were going to make breakfast the next morning. So I got up to stoke the fire, put some more wood on the fire. And I did that and walked back over to my hammock and sit down in my hammock. And when I did, as soon as I sit in my hammock, a pebble hit my hammock. And I thought, they're still here. They're watching me because I'm the only one that's awake. Here we go. I'm fixing to end up as a burrito in my hammock. But that never happened. But that was some pretty interesting activity that I had there. And there's a little story about this place. Back in the 80s, the Cub Scouts and their families decided to build a Cub Scout cabin up on top of the mountain there where we were at.
Mm-hmm.
And to get to this area, you had to either walk the trail to get up there, or these families of these Cub Scouts, there's no telling how much money they put into this cabin. And they had to haul this stuff down one side of the mountain, go through the valley, and go back up to the top where we were camped. So it was a pretty good ways. It's probably about a 2-mile hike, at least 2 miles to get where we were. The parents of these Cub Scouts and these Cub Scouts, it took a lot for them to go up there and build this cabin. The strange thing about that thing, though, was after the cabin was built, not one time did the Cub Scouts or their parents ever sleep in that cabin. And when I got there, the cabin was pretty dilapidated, was coming apart. And I thought, man, what a beautiful place to put a cabin. But for them not to ever use it, something must have happened there.
Yeah.
But that was my experience in Alabama. It was a pretty cool experience, especially when we got the yells back at us and the pebbles flying at us all night long, especially me because I was the only one up. But that was just one of my adventures that I got to go on, was to go there and have that experience. So
Yeah. What an experience.
yeah, I got lots of stories. I know we're
I have to
getting
get
late.
into them all. Yeah, I think I'm gonna close this one up.
Okay. Appreciate you having me on. I'm glad you're doing this stuff.
Thanks.
You're
I wanted to
welcome.
do it for a long time.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days I'll get my show back on the air.
I think you should.
Maybe if things get better, then I might do that. So
I think you should just put it out there. I will have my show back on.
okay. I used to have a lot of listeners.
You'd get them back.
I miss those folks. So
Yeah, I bet
maybe
you do.
someday.
It will be someday. Soon.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck. I'm going to talk at you later.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.